What's going on, guys? It's Jack and JD, and we are looking ahead to the Duke versus Army game coming up this Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's going to be at Cameron. It's going to be another fun game for the Dukies and the last tune up game here before we get to Kentucky. So, what are you thinking, JD? Just quick thoughts before we get into some of the details about Army, the history, and Duke team in general.
Well, the reason I'm doing this is one of the key things for me is since I do believe that Duke will go to 2-0 after this game, is what about the Cameron Crazies? We were pretty hard on them that Maine was allowed to go 19 for 20 from the free throw line. So I want to see more action. I want the Cameron Crazies in the game.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, let's leave it. Let's leave it at that for now. We'll get back into some more thoughts on the Duke team, what we want to see from them later on. But the Crazies, we did talk about that in the post game. That's a fair place to start off here. I agree. One thing I want to go back over from the Duke Maine game before we start looking ahead here, and you go through the Army history,
Yep.
is that we were critical of the assist to turnover ratio for Duke. It was 17 assists to 13 turnovers, and still a couple days out, that's got to be better. But on the flip side, Maine, I don't know if you caught this. They had 4 assists to 14 turnovers. And so while we had 35 makes, so I'm looking at my stats right here. So that was we assisted on 49% of our makes, which is not good enough. You want to be higher than that. But Maine had 21 made shots. They, as you said, they made a lot of free throws in the game. So they only assisted on 19%. So I would say our defense was really good. And also, part of the reason I think we had a lot of turnovers is Maine's guards. Even when we were doing the preview, that was the one thing that they were really good at. They didn't shoot the ball very well, but they got a lot of steals. And I'll just say this. I'll let you go through the Army history, but just as a little preview, there's nobody on Army's roster who got steals at the rate that even 2 or 3 guards did at Maine. So I don't think that's going to be quite the same. But take it away, JD. Go ahead with the history here.
Well, so this is in the period of 1996 to 2021. Duke has matched up with Army 8 times, and they're not surprisingly 8-0. The last time was in November of 2021 when Wendell Moore had 19 points, Paolo Banchero had 18 points, the Roach Man, Germ, was good for 14, and Trevor Keels had 10. But there's one other little stat there that's going to take us back in time. And that is that Michael Severino, Coach K's grandson, played 3 minutes. Now, why is that important? Depends how long you've been a Duke fan. So if you've been a Duke fan for as long as I have, you have to know a little bit of the history of Coach K, Duke, and Army. Coach K was the point guard at Army from 1966 to 1969 under Coach Bob Knight. And he was the captain of the Army team his senior year, where he led the cadets to the NIT at Madison Square Garden, and they finished 4th in the tournament. Now, from 1969 to 1974, Coach K was an officer in the U.S. Army, usually what happens after you go to the military academy. And he started his coaching career after that when he went to be Bob Knight's assistant at Indiana. After 1 year at Indiana, Coach K returns to Army as the head coach at the ripe old age of, how old are you?
28.
28 years old. That's when Coach K goes back to Army as the head coach. And he coaches 5 seasons with them, where his overall record was 73-59. He did take him to an NIT berth. Now, one little year or two there, and then Coach K was named head coach at Duke March 18th, 1980. But I was already a Duke fan when they played in the Final Four in St. Louis, where I went to college. That was with Mike Jaminski, G-Man, Jim Sparnacle, whatever. I'm from Queens. And Gene Banks, who was just built incredibly. Now I want to take you all the way forward to 2 years ago when I went to K Academy. And the first guy that I met there was Gene Banks. And it's full circle for me with Coach K, Army, and the fact that Michael Severino got to go with his dad and play against Army. A little bit of Duke history there for our fans.
Yeah, and just me personally, I'm glad that you mentioned what the last game was, because I was curious, but I didn't look it up beforehand. I figured you would handle that part. And I think it's pretty cool that they played. I forgot about that they played Army that was Coach K's last year, right? In November 2021, because he ended 2022. Yeah. So that seems appropriate. I'm surprised, honestly, that they only played 8 times. It felt like that was like a recurring game, but I guess it was like every couple years, so it makes sense.
Well, it's in that period of 96 to 2021. Now, Coach K starts in 1980. And so from 1980 to 1996, it doesn't appear that they played, because when you look up on Duke versus Army overall record, it's 8-0, and it's in this period, which is a little surprising that Coach K, who loves tradition, didn't go there for 16 years.
Well, he didn't have them come to Cameron. But I'm sure if you're wrong, someone will let us know in the comments below.
They will, but it was 7 of the 8 times they played. 7 were at Cameron, and 1 time in those 8 they did go to West Point.
Oh,
it was an away game.
That's pretty cool. I love that. Coach K was not known for away games. Let's just say that. Scheyer has definitely, moved out of his shadow in that department with the way he's scheduled, which has been very different. And speaking of moving on to, the next generation, let's talk about Army right now. What does their team look like? They're picked 7th out of 10 teams in the Patriot League, in the preseason poll. So what does that mean? That, they're not a favorite in the league as far as preseason rankings, but I don't know how much weight you can put into it. I'm just using it right now as a baseline. They also are coming into this game 1-0, so it's a battle of undefeated teams. They beat Albany 67-59, who is picked 7th in the preseason poll of the American East out of 9 teams, so similar matchup. They have 2 guys who returned from last year's team, in Ryan Curry, who is an all-rookie selection, and what is this? Can't read my own handwriting. Hold on here. Josh something. This is bad. This is really bad. Hold on. Mr. Scovins. I apologize. Josh Scovins, who is the Rookie of the Year in the Patriot League, which makes it even worse that I couldn't read my own handwriting. He's a very good player. He scored 22 points in the opener. He was not their leading scorer from last year. That was Jalen Rucker, who's a 5'10 guard, averaged 16.5 points, 4 rebounds, and about 3.5 assists. It is important to note their starting lineup. They played 10 guys. Only 7 of the 10 got double-digit minutes in their game against Albany. And in their starting lineup, they started 6'8 forward in Alan Spock, and Scovins was their power forward at 6'6", 215. And I think I want to pause right there for a second to just note that particular size seems to be, with the Duke roster, something where we have multiple guys who we can put multiple bodies on somebody like Scovins. When you think of Flag and Sion James and Mason Gillis. They're all, I mean, Flagg's a little bit taller, but we've got a lot of guys in that 6'6", 6'7" range who are around 220. So it seems like it could be a tough day for Scovins, but he is, the rookie of the year from the Patriot League. So I'm sure he's got a few tricks up his sleeve. And then they also, so 6'8", 6'6", and then they go 6'2", 6 foot, 5'10". So I feel like the guy who's going to benefit the most from this might be Con Knipple, in the sense that they're not going to have anybody who's going to be able to contest his shot. Because I assume Scovins is going to have to guard Flagg, and the 6'8" forward is going to have to be on Malawach, right? So there's not the next tallest guy, 6'2", which means Knipple is going to be able to shoot over him, no problem. So that's my big takeaway from just looking at the Army roster and their stats as of right now. And as I alluded to earlier, they don't have anybody who gets over, more than 1.2 steals per game. Scovins did get over a block per game, but not a lot of steals. So I do think we will be better with the turnovers, or we should be better with the turnovers in this matchup.
I think that, similar to the main game, one of the things that we could look for that could be interesting was the start of the game. And will the guards, because I still think Duke's guards are going to have to prove to me that they are up to the task. And that will happen pretty soon when we play Kentucky. But if you remember the start of the main game, it was not for long, but for a couple of minutes, they were playing with them. It was like a tie game. And so I'd like to see Proctor and Foster have a more aggressive start to the game and be able to be in more control, because we know what's coming after they play Army.
I would disagree slightly, in the sense that I felt like Foster was aggressive.
You can disagree bigly.
No, well, when I would like to disagree bigly, I'll let you know. But for right now, just slightly. And
okay.
What I'll say is that Foster, I thought, was aggressive. I just think his decision making, as you pointed out in the last video, he had 3 assists to 2 turnovers, which isn't great. Although I will say, when I went back and watched some of the footage, he had a pass to Isaiah Evans for a 3 that would have been his 4th assist. That Evans, it was in and out. So that changes, if he's got 4 assists to 2 turnovers, you look at it a little bit differently. Part of this is small sample size. The reason why I say slightly disagree is I agree with you in Proctor. I felt like he wasn't aggressive early on in the main game, and I think I'd like to see him, I agree, I'd like to see him be a bit more aggressive in this matchup with Duke. But just before we get into Duke, I just have a fun, I want to go around a little bit to Cooper Flagg's teammates before, and then I'll let you we'll go into
sure.
the Duke team. So Cooper Flagg's high school teammates, that Montverde team, there was a lot of talk about how good they were. And from their first games, we know how, Cooper had a great first game, but his teammates were also just outstanding. And we're going to start with Rob Wright, who came off the bench at Baylor. They lost pretty handily in their opener to Gonzaga. He played by far the toughest competition. He was the point guard at Montverde. 12 points, 6 assists, 2 steals off the bench. Really solid performance for Rob Wright. Then I'll just go up in order of points. So Liam McNeely, who's at UConn. I know a lot of this is new to you, JD, so you're learning along with some other people, but some people may
Absolutely.
know this.
I may not know the starting lineup at Montverde when Cooper was there, but so I'm really interested. So keep going.
Yeah, so Liam McNeely for UConn, and they had a phenomenal name. Shout out Alex Caravan. He was excellent in that matchup against Sacred Heart. Liam McNeely, 18 points. He had 3 threes and had 11 rebounds.
Nice.
2 assists as well. Then Derek Queen, who probably had the best performance. He was the center at Montverde. He's at Maryland right now. 22 points, 20 rebounds. 2 blocks and a steal. And
Who's playing against him?
uh
The 6'8" big guy for Army?
maybe. Let's see who they played. 1 second. I didn't write that one down. I think I'm gonna guess. I know that they didn't play anybody as good as Gonzaga. That's for sure. Trying to pull it up as we go. They played Manhattan. So take it for what it's
Okay.
worth. And lastly, the power forward from that Montverde team, Asa Newell, had 26 points, 11 rebounds, 3 blocks, and a steal in their matchup where they took on, quickly, who they play here. Next time I'll write these down. Tennessee Tech. And it was actually a pretty close game. So it was really important that Newell played as well as he did. So the reason I bring that up is just to say Cooper Flagg's high school teammates are pretty good, and so is Cooper. But I think right now, before we get back into the starting five and those guys, because we spend a lot of time talking about them, let's just go over, Sion James, Mason Gillis, Malik Brown, the 3 transfers who come off the bench who are part of the rotation. What did you think about how they did in the matchup versus Maine?
So I think in the second half is when we really got to see them. As the lead got built up, they got more minutes. And what I could see from watching them, we do have a solid 8. And it's going to be very important when we go up, when Coach Shire pits us against the 4 teams of Kentucky, Kansas, Arizona, and
Auburn.
So, because he's going to have to go deep. And so those 3 are definitely part of his rotation. So what I'm really looking for is who else gets minutes. Does he stay with the 8? Again, getting ready for the 4 big games that he scheduled, or is he trying to let Darren Harris start to see if he could be the shooter that everyone says he is? I think it was LeBron that gave him a shout out.
Banchero.
Banchero, that's right. It was Duke royalty that actually gave him a shout out, and then Banchero is not playing for a while, but Darren Harris. Absolutely. Yeah. Let's see if he gets some time. And
shout out to Paolo, by the way. Hope he heals up. He was playing great to start the season. So I hope he can come back and be in that same form, because it seemed like he took a leap.
He sure did. Every year. He is tracking, and I know he is tracking Tatum.
Yeah.
Because Tatum is phenomenal for Boston, and Banchero was bringing Orlando along at this incredible pace, and the injury is just heartbreaking to us Duke fanatics, because we were all wondering how far Orlando would go. But hopefully it's the kind of injury he'll get back. It's a long season, so.
Yeah, and just like circling back to what you were saying about Harris, I think it's interesting to follow. I think there's a little bit of a battle for who's the 9th man, because I think the first 8 is very clear at this point.
Right.
And the exhibition games, Harris was the 9th man, and in the first regular season game, it was Isaiah Evans who was the 9th man, and Harris didn't get in until the second half. So in terms of things to look for, I think that's, one of the things to follow in this game, outside of, how does Gillis and James and Malik Brown, how do they play? I think with those 3 guys in particular, the one thing that they may not get, Gillis hit a few threes. I think he had 2 threes. Him and James both had double-digit points. I don't know if every game they're going to do that. But what I will say is every game we can expect a level of consistency in terms of their defense, in terms of their
Yep.
basketball IQ. And I think that's really helpful in the sense that in the starting lineup, while they're really talented, there are three freshmen who, again, Cooper Flag, still 17. As long as he's 17, we're gonna keep getting that out there, and it's gonna just take some time for them to learn and adjust to the college level, and especially as the competition ramps up. So it's really important to have those three guys off the bench. But just getting back to, is it going to be Evans or Harris? Because it seems like Shire is really reluctant to go truly 10 deep.
Well, we'll find out how deep he wants to go, but I think it's great that he has this problem. And as you know, we're also wondering if Patrick is going to, when he'll join, which would make it number 11. And but what I really like about Sion James, Mason Gillis, and Malik Brown is that when they're in, again, we're going to find out when they go up against tougher competition, but the sense that you're not going to push Duke around. They're not soft, these guys. And I think that's an important, especially Mal in the middle. This is a very interesting team. They're the way it's going to take a while for Shire to figure out how he wants them to play together. But I think it's so important that they not come across as soft, and that, I love going to the Tennessee Volunteer team as just a brutally tough team from a couple of years ago. So that's part of what I'm looking for, is who else he's going to rely on. The starting five absolutely looks set.
Certainly. And yeah, I mean, unfortunately, kind of similar to, the preview for Maine, in the sense that I don't know how much we're going to necessarily learn about the team in this game, because I do expect them to win handily. But we will learn a little bit more about the rotation. How does Coach Shire see it? Because the one thing that I would disagree with you on is that I'm not sure that he's going to go deeper when we play Kentucky, Kansas, Arizona, Auburn. I would think it's the opposite, that instead of getting to Harris or Evans as the ninth man, he kind of cuts the rotation at 8, and he only plays those 8 guys against Kentucky, etc.
You may be right, unless, of course, this team emerges as more like the Kentucky team of, what was it, Anthony Davis? When was the two?
That was 2014. It was the year that Duke won with Okafor and Jones, Tyus Jones, and Winslow and Quinn Cook. When they had Karl Towns and Booker and
Carl Towns, right?
The Harrison twins, and Ulis,
they did
guys.
the
Platoon.
platooning, and that is something we're going to have to track over minutes. These are guys that are expecting. Maybe some of the transfers are willing to say, hey, I just want to be part of a winning program, so I'll play what I play. But he does have as many as 11 players that could give him minutes. And so you're right. I don't know that we get any clarity from a game with Army. The initial exposure will come with the Kentucky game.
Yes, and like I said, going into the main game, the one thing I want to see, which we started off not great, but it got better as the game went on, which was the defensive intensity, which, in the exhibition games outside of the first half with Lincoln, I thought was really good. And similar in the main game, as the game went on, I thought they got better. And that's the one thing I want to see them maintain in this game with Army, where it could be easy mentally. As you said in the in the main, I think it was the reaction video, you come into the game. Maybe you didn't say it. Maybe you just said it off air. But you come in, you're Duke, you're playing Maine. You kind of just expect to win. And Maine, good for them. In the beginning, they had a compete level, and they were playing right with Duke. And I think the important thing for Duke, looking back on, like, how many times in the past couple years did the game start and we're down 10-0?
Exactly where I was going. And I didn't know how many years back you wanted to go, but it used to frustrate us no end that it seemed like we, from the jump ball, or the beginning of the game, we just didn't have an intensity. And I think that should be something that Coach Scheyer should definitely get out of these guys. Otherwise, if you're not going to play tough from the get-go, then I got plenty of other people who will.
Right. And I mean, I don't remember it in the Coach K years. I do remember it both Scheyer years 1 and 2, where that's been a theme. You tell me if you remember that in the Coach K years, but I just don't remember it being quite as consistent as it's been the past couple years. And so that's why I think maintaining that intensity, because it's a habit more than anything else. And if you kind of let off the gas in this game, it's going to be a little harder to ramp it back up against Kentucky, which I think is going to be a great game.
So your question is, over Coach K's 42 years.
Well, not that far, just the past.
And I think, but wait, in fairness to the question, I think it always depended upon the makeup of the team. So there were certain years that they just had incredible defensive players, and the team was known for being a very strong defensive team. There were years that their offense was, absolutely cueing from 3-point range, from bringing the ball up. So, I think the identity of this Duke team is, got to get it in there. I love my wings, my teriyaki wings, Cooper, and K2. However, I still think even with them, the identity of this team is going to emerge, and that's why my hat goes off to Coach Scheyer for scheduling 4 tough games early on.
And I want to dig a little deeper. Like, when you say the identity is going to emerge, like, what do you have an idea of what that's going to be? Or are you just waiting to kind of see what it is?
Right. So what I'm thinking is there is a chance that this team can go for 90 points a game, even against really good teams. They're that so far. The makeup looks like, K2 and Coop can put up 20 points each, and maybe one of the other guys coming off of the bench, Mason Gillis or somebody, could also do that. It would be like the year that they had Kennard, they had
Grayson, Tatum.
Yep, the triplets. They could each put up 20 points. So the identity was always which of those guys was going to take the lead, but you almost counted on all 3 of them. There are other, or the identity of this team with Mal in the middle, Coop, and the intensity of the transfer portal is they are a incredibly tough defensive team. I guess it will always depend on the matchups, but that's why I say from exhibition games to Army and Maine, it's hard to know the identity, and especially with the recruiting class, only 2 guys coming back and the transfer portal players. The identity isn't there yet. The excitement is there. I can't wait, for tomorrow night, or then I just have to get through the weekend for the first real test. And it will be very interesting to see how they coalesce and which they get. And look, I mean, to waffle completely between an offensive team and a defensive team, they may turn out to be a little bit of both, in which case they're going to the Final Four.
Yeah, I think more than anything, they're going to be a good defensive team who, as you said, they're physical, they're not soft, and they're going to make it tough to score on them. I think the one thing that's been very interesting since Coach Scheyer has taken over is that's been his emphasis. And on the podcast, Coach Carrawell, that he did with Foster, he kind of made a joke about how that's been Scheyer's emphasis since he's been a coach. But as a player, that really wasn't who he was. So,
good for him.
Yeah. And listen, I thought I kind of like, from when I remember Scheyer, great offensive player. He could have been a decent team defender, but just not the first thing that comes to mind. And since Scheyer has been the coach, even last year's team, which wasn't the best defensive team, they weren't bad though. They were still a solid defensive group. And that was with Filipowski playing out of position as a center and then playing 3 small guards. So I think that's where they hang their hat. And then offensively, the 3-point shooting is really where I feel like is going to be the best strength of this team. When you talk about, obviously, K2, Caleb Foster, Tyrese Proctor, Mason Gillis, Sion James, and that's where I feel like Harris or Evans, maybe both, can find their way on the court, because both those guys can certainly shoot the ball. And just lastly, before I'll let you go, and then we'll wrap this up here. The one thing we didn't mention, you mentioned it a little bit, is whether we'll see Mr. Gongba get some minutes. And I really hope so in this matchup versus Maine, because once we play Kentucky, I think it's going to be hard. He'll have to wait, until the next game to find some playing time. So I hope he gets some minutes in the second half of this matchup versus Army.
Well, and the one thing you and I don't know is the extent of his injury, and therefore what is his timeline. And yes, he was on the bench, but it could be that he's on the bench for a month or two. It just, there's no way of knowing. Duke will never let us know. So I'm going to just say my last comment on this is to all our listeners, if any of you are Cameron crazies, you guys cannot allow 19 for 20 from the free throw line. I'm going to say the best you could do is, it's Army 70%. And then I'll say, okay, you did your job. But come on, guys. You're the 6th man. Always have been.
Yes. All right. There's your challenge to the crazies. So with that being said, this game is going to be tomorrow, Friday, 6 p.m., November 8th. We will be live probably 10 minutes after the game doing our reaction. Quickly, for those of you who are able to, we won't be able to, but for those of you who are able to, 7 o'clock, North Carolina plays Kansas in a game that Duke fans will be interested in for obvious reasons. Obviously, we want to know what North Carolina looks like. We play Kansas in a few weeks. So that'll be a game that I'll go back and watch. But if you can watch it live, it's at 7 o'clock tomorrow, which will be a fun game. And with that being said, if you're new, subscribe to the channel. We'll be covering Duke basketball, all sorts of basketball stuff. I'll do some NBA draft stuff. JD will do some Duke in the NBA, some other Duke history stuff. So if you're into that, hit the subscribe button, like this video, leave a comment, share with a friend. All that stuff helps us out. And we'll see you guys next time. Peace.